over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much. And yeah, once again, thank you for the invitation, because the first time I was on the stage, when I was still on stage, was in 2015. So I've been going to the meetups for a year before I started sharing my knowledge. And at that point, I was talking about SEO for developers and what it meant, how developers could work with the SEO team and how they could use SEO to improve their own visibility and their employability, and how they could find more business basically if they were freelancing. And now I'd like to talk to you about the bigger picture, the Martech stack, all the technologies that marketers are using at the moment. Because obviously, as the years go by, more and more technology is added to the mix, which obviously presents challenges. And as I was saying earlier, we have recognized the need of more and more technical people. Now, marketers, many marketers, let's say, are more on the creative side and not as data driven. Luckily, there has been a shift in the last few years. And at the same time, though, it's good to have people who are a lot more technical and to have good relationship with the marketing team, because I know that at times there is not as much collaboration between the marketing and development teams. And I think that is kind of time for this to change, because we know that we need your skills and expertise. And at the same time, well, we can't do it without you, basically, because we optimize websites that you have built. We work with platforms that you have built. So fundamentally, you are the key to our success. And this is where I want us all to work together and not in silos. Now, let's see if I could change the slide. Whoops. Okay. So there is a quote that I love, and it's called, "If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But if you can manage it, you can master it." And it's from Tony Robbins. And the idea behind this is very simple, that I think that we live in a day and age where the statement "I think" when it comes to data should be irrelevant, should not exist, and should be banned even. Because still the number of times when I speak to clients about certain aspect of their business and I say, how do you do in this area of the business with the paid advertising, or how much traffic do you have on the website? Is the traffic growing? Oh, I think, and for me, there's no room to think. You can think about what the reason for the up or down is, but there is data. However, what we found is that the data is not always consistent, it's not in the same place. So in an ideal world, we could have a situation where, because different channels are used for bringing people to a website and for the whole customer journey, post sale, and then customer satisfaction surveys, finance, and so on. So in an ideal world, we need to be in a position to say, okay, this user, before they became a customer, they found the website on social media, then they downloaded this asset, and then they did something else. So 1 + 2 + 3, 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. And basically to have the information about what's working, what's not working. Because there's still companies out there that are spending a lot of money on the technology itself that they're not using to its full potential, or on marketing budget that they don't know how it's performing, which to me, as I said, is ludicrous. Now, the reality, as I said, is that it's not as linear as just 1, 2, 3. It's not as linear because there are many things coming into the equation. One of it is the data. And the data comes from the different systems. And this is where the challenge begins. Because on an average day, the average marketer uses all of those systems to find out what's happening with the user journey, what elements of the marketing is working, what's not working. Well, the reality though is that, as I said, for various reasons, we don't always have the information. The information is not complete, it's not consistent, and therefore we can't analyze the data. Now, very often people only have a website or an app. So pretty much the platform where they engage with the users on a daily basis. So whether they want to bring traffic to the website or the app, it's irrelevant, but this is their main bread and butter because this is where their service offering is. And that could, the data there could be tracked with Google Analytics. It could be tracked as a standard thing. It could be tracked as other different tools. On the website itself, you could also have A/B testing tools such as Google Optimize. You could have mouse tracking tools such as Crazy Egg or Hotjar. And the idea being is that even within each one of those platforms, within each one of those systems, there is data that could be collected that could be used to identify the optimal user journey that would allow us to have the maximum impact from the spend that we have. Because very often, as I said, where companies don't know which channel works the best for them, they have the spaghetti approach. They chuck it at the wall and hope that one of it sticks. And I'm talking big companies with big budgets. I can very easily, a few companies come to mind that spend more than £10,000 a month on Google Ads without knowing how much that returns. And that is all over the world. I'm talking companies in the UK, in the US, in Denmark, in the Emirates. So it's not only something to do with the UK market that we haven't figured something out, it's all over the world, which again presents a big challenge, but at the same time, it's an opportunity because the problem is consistent throughout, which means that once we crack it, then we'll be able to apply the same logic and the same way of thinking and the same processes into other markets, into other platforms. Now, CRMs, for those of you who have not had a lot of experience with CRMs, those are customer relationship management systems, and those platforms that hold information about the customer. And in an ideal world, the CRM needs to have as much information as possible for the particular customer. And that includes name, address, phone number, what they have purchased from you, have they actually purchased from you, because you can have different stages. They could be a lead, they could be an opportunity, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified lead, they could be a customer, they could be a return customer, they could be past customer. And obviously, based on all of that data, businesses could make projections as to how much money they need to put if they want to see that person converting. And it's about reverse engineering it to say, okay, for example, we interacted with 100 people. So we had 100 leads, let's say. And then we know that at the end of it, we had 10 customers. So if we find out that from between lead and customer and this is where part of the challenge comes from, because different people define lead as a different thing. So you can have one company referring to lead as a lead, one company referring to it as an opportunity, and one as a prospect, or one even as a marketing qualified lead. So there's a lot of inconsistency in how people refer to things, which means that if someone who is a CRM expert comes from one company to the other, it is possible that even though they're good at what they do, they will not measure the right thing unless they ask the question, and obviously I hope they do, unless they ask the question, what does lead mean in the context of the business where they're working at the moment? The customer relationship management, this is the primary reason for it, to have information about the customer, their buying behavior, their interactions, whether they have received an email from one of the team members, what kind of email, whether they've received a marketing email, and pretty much to have a full picture, full profile of this person, so that as and when there is a promotion that fits people that have purchased a particular product, the marketer could very easily go and say, oh, I want to market to people who have purchased this product in the last 6 months and have not been on the website for the last 2 weeks, because in a way, let's say, it suggests that they would have seen the promotion because the promotion is on the website. And this way you can segment the data and you can target the people that you need to, and you can optimize your time, your budget, and therefore you can maximize the impact of the campaign. However, We then go into how the CRM interacts with other systems. So the website should be feeding information to the CRM. Then the CRM uses connectors sometimes, such as API or Segment, that's the most popular ones, to get information from other internal systems into the CRM and or the website. Because there could be some even customer experience platforms that use one of those integrations to feed the data into the CRM. Now, because there are quite a lot of inconsistencies, as I said, in the way the different platforms refer to the same information, then things get lost in translation. And then on top of that, again, when it comes to the data transfer, now some systems have different way of tracking visitors, which means that obviously, as you all know, code executes from top to bottom in normal circumstances, which means that if the Google Analytics code is at the top of the website, and then one of those other systems, the code is at the bottom, well, chances are, if the page is very heavy, it is possible that some users would not be recorded in the system that's below, because obviously they haven't fully loaded the page or whatever it might be, but they have been recorded in the top one, which means that then we have Google Analytics recording one set of data, and then other analytics tools recording other, or vice versa. So there is inconsistency in data from that point of view as well. And then you go into the finance side of things, and you have a look at what the e-commerce data is from the website or from the CRM. You link it with the finance data, because finance data should be the truth, the whole truth, which means that if the finance data says that there has been a revenue that is £10,000 for the month, well, that is what it is, because that's the money in the bank. However, as I said, for us as marketers to identify what has generated that 10,000 so that we can generate more of it, we need to reverse engineer to see what else is happening. But then there are all those marketing channels that each system has their own ways of tracking, as I said, and it's just all over the place, for lack of a better word. And yeah, the challenges, as I said, are of multiple natures, the different nature, let's say, have different challenges, but all of them require development input, or would benefit definitely from development input. And the first one, I touched on quite a few of them already anyway, but the first one is the data tracking, the data and tracking. I have seen quite a lot of times where there is duplicate tracking code on a website, which means that the data is skewed. Because with all due respect, garbage in, garbage out. If we want to make data-driven decisions, which is again one of the challenges, because as I said, we want to be able to reverse engineer which one of the channel works. But then if it turns out that the data is flawed, that means that even if we do have the data and the systems are communicating with each other, then we don't have the true information, and therefore the decisions that we're making, even though they're data driven because we're looking at the data, could still lead us astray. And having single tracking code working, firing correctly, not returning 404, because sometimes that happens if you have empty Google Tag Manager containers, and then that could trigger other things. So it is important to make sure that there is only one tracking code per page per system. As mentioned, there could be multiple tracking codes for different systems, but there shouldn't be multiple Google Analytics tracking codes for the same account on the same page. The other extreme, obviously, is lack of tracking code. Again, as I said, the number of businesses, and we're talking big businesses, that say to me, oh, I think that we're doing well, and they don't even have Google Analytics on their website. And I'm saying, well, how do you know? Oh, well, our agency told us. So well, I'll be interested to find out where they get their data from. And then, or sometimes what we find is that part of the website has the tracking code, and you think that because nowadays most websites use templates of one way or another, then the tracking code is part of the template and therefore it fires. However, they have subdomains for some of their specific logins, or they have hidden code, hidden pages behind the paywall, behind user login, that for some reason, because they're using now a different template, and therefore the tracking code's not there, which means that you can have the following user journey where someone goes on the website, you know that they're on the website, you know that they're on the whatever service page you have, and you have Google Tag Manager events, let's say, that you would have set up to track the number of people clicking on the register button. And then when people click on the register button, they go on a subdomain. And as I said, the subdomain doesn't have the tracking code or doesn't have the same tracking code, which means that suddenly you no longer have information what happened to this user. So they showed the intent that they wanted to register, but did they register? So how can you connect that the marketing efforts have resulted in a new customer? You can't really, because the number of times I see the following situation where someone looks at just the top level information, for example, 5% conversion rate, and you think, well, it's not that bad, depending on the industry, depending on the time of year and various other factors, the device. However, what happens is that I want to know that if it's 5% conversion rate, does it mean that 100 people came on the website? Well, it means 100 people came on the website, 5%, 5 people became customers. But does it mean that 100 people came on the website? Let's say it's an e-commerce website. 50 people added to basket, only 5 checked out. Or does it mean that 100 people came on the website, 5 added to basket, and 5 checked out? So fixing those two is a completely different thing, because it's so well and good that people show the intent. But if it turns out that 50 added to basket and only 5 checked out, so is now a problem with the checkout? Is it too complicated? Is it too long? Is it not loading? Did we not show the delivery information before that? So what is the reason? Whereas otherwise, if it's a case of just bringing more people to click the button, then it's easier, because we know that, okay, as soon as they click the button, they're done. They're going to register. They're going to purchase. So from that point of view, it's important to have the tracking consistent and unified, and just a single instance across all the systems that you have. As I said, data integrity afterwards. So we can have people submitting multiple forms. So do we count those the 5 people that converted? Would that be the same person double tracked, or is it a case of even some of the data missing? But this is also something that you, with a validation, you could do by adding validation on the input fields, for example. Or this is something that you could have, I don't know, a system in the background that would find out pieces of information that are missing. So if you know for well, but again, it's a case of you working with marketing and the marketing team or the operations team talking to you and communicating what the needs of the business are. If there's no way for the business to ship a parcel to a person without an address, well, you need to make sure that if somehow there is a person in the database without an address, there is a system that's running in the background and notifies someone to take action. Otherwise, it could very well be that people don't realize on time, and then there is unhappy customer because you see they've been waiting for X amount of time because the system broke somewhere. Then the other thing is disjointed data sets. As I mentioned, because we have all those different systems and different platforms, that means that the same information is included in multiple places. But again, if we have if each one of those systems is using their own tracking to get the information, that means that we have some information for the user on one platform, some information on the other platform, and there's no communication, which means, as I said, that if you have, if one system refers to a person as a contact, but then another system refers to them as a user, but then in the first system, user means something completely different, that means that it very easily we can have a confusion as to who the person is. Are they contact? Are they user? What does that mean for the business? Can we use them in these marketing activities? Could we remarket to them? Who has what channel has contributed to them get into the system in the first place? Is that channel working? Is that person relevant to the business? It is a lot of information that needs to be tracked and needs to be unified and needs to be collected, that currently it's not. Now, the operational challenges are such that there's no processes. Developers, I found, are very, very good at processes, because obviously that's how your brains work. And this is, and the documentation is the other thing, because you are trained or self-taught, but you have the tendency as people to document things, to make notes, to put the process, to have change logs. Whereas as marketers, we very often don't. We would like to think that we do, but on the whole, we don't, which means that we make a change, we don't document it, 3 months later, something else happens, and we didn't realize actually the change that we made knocked something else out, but because we didn't document it, we're not quite sure. We think, oh, at the beginning of March, something happened. What was the beginning? Was it the 1st? Was it the 8th? Because that could then coincide with a campaign that we did, so could coincide with the weather. So depending on the product you offer, the weather could impact that. Could be to do with a sports event. So there's so many different factors that could impact this, the way the campaigns work and the way the data is analyzed. And therefore, it is great to have someone who has the development knowledge and who has the development way of thinking to be able to put processes in place. And yeah, the lack of marketing tech knowledge. Now, more and more, there is higher and higher need for technical marketers, as I said, because many marketers are a lot more, let's say, content driven, creative driven, and are not as much data driven. Therefore, they create beautiful pieces of work. However, the impact of those is hard to track. So if you go to a branding agency, there is not a very clear cut on how you're going to measure the impact of a rebranding exercise, for example. But unfortunately, many companies that are working with branding, they just want to see the brands redesigned and refreshed and to look nice and to have the personas. But then in terms of the actual impact on the business, there's no process for them to find out what change that made it, and whether there is even a need to rebrand in the first place. And at the same time, in SEO, which, as I was mentioned earlier, is where I initially started in marketing, in SEO, there is a lot more need for technical people, because SEO, for those of you who haven't encountered the term, if there are any, the search engine optimization, and I'm sorry if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, and for that, there is a lot more need for technical marketing knowledge and for technical knowledge in the first place, because we're talking about schema markup, so that's JSON usually. We're talking about server A/B testing. We're talking about server tracking, tagging. We're talking about improving of the site speed, so gzip compressions and various other things. So there's a lot more need within that. But there, as I said, so SEO is only one piece of the puzzle. There are many other aspects of digital marketing that don't require that kind of knowledge, and therefore people who have not been exposed to SEO are not necessarily as technical. And with SEO, you have even machine learning scripts with Python to forecast keywords and rankings and demand and various other things. But yeah, on the whole, the marketers don't have as much tech knowledge as we can have, basically. And the lack of regular data and structure maintenance, this is also something that that developers could help with, to either guide this through the company and to be the champions of making sure that once in a while you step back and you review whether the current system and the current setup works for the business needs. Because guess what? Businesses evolve. You would be in a tricky situation if the business that you joined 5 years ago is the same business now, because that means it hasn't grown, it hasn't developed. And what is the point of a business? Well, that's a bit rude, but still, if a business is not growing, then there's something fundamentally wrong, because businesses need to grow, and that's not necessarily in size, because there are some companies that are called like small giants, because when it comes to size, when it comes to client base, they consciously remain smaller. However, in terms of offering, in terms of adding value, they're still growing. So there's nothing ever the same, and if it is, then you need to question it, because basically the technology that is here today was not there 5 years ago, which means that if the business wants to be future proof, in an ideal world, it needs to take advantage of the technology that's now, and to have a look at what marketing automations could be happening, what other operational automations could be implemented within the business. And yeah, one of the challenges that I've seen in quite a few companies is exactly because someone has added the set of, well, someone has got data from somewhere. Now, luckily with GDPR, it's a lot easier to monitor where that's come from. But let's say that hasn't even been checked. And then someone adds 10,000 records to the database, incomplete data, some addresses are missing for some customers, even, well, some people, even the email is missing, key information that pretty much you cannot do anything with a person in terms of marketing unless you resolve these. And then by the time the person finishes resolving those problems, for whatever reason, they leave the business, someone else comes in, they bring their own data set or their own ways of thinking, which means that the things are stacked on top of each other without anyone taking the time to regularly review those. And at the moment, I'm working with a couple of companies exactly to reverse engineer what's happening, because they have automation that's built on top of other automation, which means that because then the people who are in the business do not have the technical knowledge to that extent to reverse engineer that. So they wanted to change one thing without realizing that it's connected to three other things. So they changed the one thing and suddenly three other things broke. And having the ability and someone with the technical knowledge and mindset of looking at the bigger picture and how things are related to each other is a key to any business nowadays. So it is important for you to be involved, and for the marketing operational team within the businesses where you work to know that you need to be involved in things wider than the direct development, and you can add a lot more value into that. Now, the integration challenges, sometimes there are no connectors between systems, and this is a thing that businesses use. Project management systems such as Asana, let's say, and Jira, well, Jira bugs, but they'll use Asana or Monday.com, and then some would use a CRM such as HubSpot, others would use Salesforce, and then sometimes there is no connector between Salesforce, for example, and Monday.com. In this particular case, there is, but let's say there isn't, which means that again, we're in a situation whereby there's no one within the business who knows how to connect both. They're not available through Zapier or through Segment, which means that you have the two data sets of the same people into different systems, and therefore you cannot fully automate things, you cannot fully audit the data, and you cannot make informed decisions. So this is holding people back quite a lot. RevOps as a job role is something that I'll touch on very briefly at the end, but RevOps is to do with revenue operations and marketing performance. Those are two jobs that are now in the last couple of years are becoming a lot more prominent. And they're in very high demand exactly for that reason, because businesses now understand that that the user journey is no longer linear. that there is a lot more competition, that people could just put up a website like this and be a competitor straight away through paid search, through direct messaging, let's say on LinkedIn, which means that they need to look at the bigger picture and they need to know where the money comes from. Then lack of public APIs, again, if not every system has an API, because sometimes it's a proprietary system and therefore there's no way to take data out of that system, which then presents a problem. Because if you have a custom built CRM, so you hold all your customers' information in one system, but there's no way for you to take it out or to take it out on a regular basis, be it even with, downloads and cron jobs to send the information to an email newsletter platform, let's say, then you would not be able to automatically send a welcome email to every new customer, because it would mean that because both systems could not be connected, that means that as soon as there is a new customer, you need to physically go into one system, take the information, put it into the email marketing, and then send them that welcome email with, let's say, 10% off, which in theory and in practice is not very good, because if the customer becomes a customer at 2 a.m., well, in an ideal world, they would expect those 10% off straight away, because let's say that's the reason they signed up at that time, because they were just browsing, tired, and can't go to sleep. They browse a website, see 10% off, and think, well, I might as well. And then there is nothing to send the information straight away. So that's bad user experience, and therefore could damage the brand. And it's important to make sure that doesn't happen. So having APIs and different connections is key. As I said, the inconsistency of terminology and fields, I've touched on this quite a lot already, and unifying the data, because otherwise, if we have the data in different systems without consistency, without flow between the systems, then we have too many systems to maintain, which definitely cost money, definitely cost time, require different specialities. And that's why if there is a way to choose one central system, which very often is the CRM, if you choose one central system and then from everywhere else pull the data into that central system, to have all the fields that are relevant to the user journey, that are relevant to the customer themselves or the prospect even, that means that there's a lot of power then in marketing to them in the relevant way, or to even looking after them if they become a client already. So to send them net promoter score surveys, to send them a referral scheme, to send them if you have reward points and other relevant communication. And then the solution, as I said, is you. It's you being more involved. Of course, I'd like to think that this would be reflected in your pay, but even from a careers point of view, for you to have the opportunity to take part into projects that are to do with revenue operations, to do with the more strategic part of the business rather than the day-to-day only, is going to benefit you and the business. And I'm not quite sure what your contractual obligations are, so I'm not wishing for anyone to get in trouble. But nowadays, more and more companies are allowing, especially people like developers and marketers, to do freelance work, which means that suddenly, if you know some of those things, you could market yourself in a slightly different way and you expand your skill set. And yeah, as I said, what it means for you is that you increase your value as a developer, because not all developers know this. Not all developers want even to be involved in the marketing side of things, which I completely understand. But at the same time, if you want to grow, acquiring different skills is a must. And you can consider even different job opportunities if you wanted to at some point, exactly because it will still be development, but it will be in a different way. So you'd still be using your, as I said, your skills as a developer in terms of technical skills, way of thinking, process, documentation, logic, and having this within a business, it's invaluable. But you can learn a new language. One of the CRMs, HubSpot, has their own language because they have their own CMS as well, which means that they, like Facebook as well. If you want to write for Facebook, they have the FBML, and HubL is the HubSpot language that is used to create websites. And it's, again, like I think that Lucy was saying earlier, that when she was looking at Java and then compared to the object-oriented PHP, it was slightly similar because the syntax. So it's similar thing with HubL as well, because it is the same idea. You have variables, you have arrays, you have objects, you have the different elements that are typical for, well, most languages, and then it's just slightly different syntax. Or what you can do is develop connectors for your apps. This is first for the apps that you have, make sure that they're able to be connected to HubSpot, to Salesforce, to all of those big ones, or at least to have connections that are going into Zapier that then people could translate. Because what I'm working with one of my clients at the moment is they're using this, I'm not going to mention names for privacy, but they're using a system that generates contracts for them, which means as soon as someone becomes they have their own SaaS product. So as soon as someone becomes a client in that SaaS product, so they register, the information is sent into the CRM, and then from the CRM, there should be a contract that is sent out. But then the contract is generated by this third-party system that doesn't fully integrate with the CRM. Therefore, everything is going through Zapier. But then with Zapier, it's not retrieving all the fields that they need, which means that now the company is considering getting rid of this platform, not the platform, the app that is generating the contracts, because it's not able to connect neither with the CRM nor with Zapier, because at least through Zapier or through segments to be able to make the connections, but it's not possible, which means that it's no longer fit for purpose for them to look at the bigger picture. Now, CRMs are becoming more and more prominent. As I said, bigger companies are using them to keep all the data in the same place, which means that they recognize the value and the power of having all the data in one platform. So if you can, by all means, develop a connector for the big platforms, because that is going to mean more business for your company. Or if it's something that you're developing or you want to start your own venture, this is still something that you can do. And as I mentioned, RevOps is one of the jobs that recently became a lot more prominent, even though that it has been around for years and years. But it's the revenue operations, and exactly refers to finding out what part of the marketing budget works, in what capacity, what is the return on investment, what systems are being used, and whether there are other systems that could replace the existing systems to optimize either the user journey or to optimize the revenue, basically. And an interesting stat from Talented is that there are 1.8 candidates for, whoops, I forgot on the K here, for 1.3K vacancies, which means that pretty much there is only one candidate per vacancy, which means that if there is a job, you can get it. And as I said, people nowadays, exactly because the price range, which for a good developer is not that much anyway, if you think about it, but the price range that companies are offering is getting more and more in line with the increased demand. At the same time, though, they recognize that they don't always need someone full-time, which means that this is where the fractional resource comes in and the freelancing. So even if you want to freelance, you still be able to find a lot of work by just doing those connection with the other systems. And yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Thanks very much, Ali. I'll just end the recording there. And anybody have any questions? Please.